There once was a woman who promised her hand to a man who was departing for the front. Devout by nature, she spent mornings, afternoons, and evenings in prayer for the safety of her beloved. Perhaps in response to her earnest pleas, one night a bird enveloped in light appeared to her in a dream and began to speak.
The man you once loved will surely return safely,
said the bird in a beautiful voice. These words brought great comfort to the woman, and she began weeping tears of joy.
However,
continued the bird,
his heart will surely know.
Soon the man returned as the bird had foretold, his body covered in scars beyond counting. But as the bird has foretold, he returned with the unfamiliar woman of extraordinary beauty at his side. Despite this, the pious woman could not contain her love for the man and ran out to meet him as he approached. Surprised, the man embraced her, then collapsed to the ground. The pious woman stood over him, a bloody dagger in one hand and the ripe crimson fruit of his heart in the other.
His heart will stray no longer,
she whispered, amidst the gathering pool of blood, her face awash with pure ecstasy. She placed a tender kiss on her beloved's heart and offered a prayer of gratitude. A girl was engaged to a man who roamed the battlefields. The girl held her belief, prayed in the mornings, at noon, on evenings, and hoped the man would remain safe and sound. Maybe her straightforward prayers did reach. One night, a brightly shining bird appeared in her dreams and left her with these words:
"The man shall return safe and sound."
At the bird's whispered words, the faithful girl cried in joy.
However,
the brightly shining bird continued in its beautiful voice,
his heart won't return.
Eventually, the man did come back alive, just as the bird predicted, with a plethora of scars across his formidable body and a beautiful stranger at his side. Even then, the girl ran towards the man, her heart filled with her love. Until this point, the man was surprised and embraced the girl. However, he eventually fell down. Standing beside the fallen man was the girl, her right hand grasping a blood-stained dagger, her left hand holding what resembled a red-black ripened fruit, the man's heart. His heart shall never wander again. Standing in the pool of blood, the girl kissed the man's heart with an expression of utmost fulfillment and intoxicated happiness, and gave a prayer of thanks. So this girl had huge sets of horns on her, beautiful horns like a bull, just growing out of her head above their ears. I had myself a gander where the horns meet the head, and let me tell ya, they were coming straight out of her skull. She was the only kid like that in the whole village. The others were normal. The kid with the horns though, born real small, apparently. The horns were, I mean, not the kid. And hell, they wouldn't need her to be. Fat chance the kid's mama would have been able to push out a pair of horns as huge as that. You'd think a kid like that would be bullied, right? Well, you'd be wrong. That kid was the hardest person for miles in any direction. Wasn't a man in the village who tangled with her. And we're talking men instead of nothing. She was the best at doing work what needed physical strength and all that. And she always led the charge whenever the shades attacked. And the folks loved her for that, sure. But most of all, they loved her because she was always cheerful and just plain tough. But one day, this huge shade attacked the village. That was just too strong. It tore the men apart like old rags, and half the guys in the village died. The girl with the horns, she fought with all she had, but eventually she couldn't keep up, and the shade lifted her off the ground and ripped the horns right out of her head. The way she screamed was nothing like you've ever heard. Sound shook the earth itself. It did. After that, things got real quiet. So I stepped outside and found both the shade and the girl dead. Each of them had wounds all over, and they were leaking blood just about everywhere. And don't judge me for saying this now, but it was almost beautiful. Like looking at dark red flowers in full bloom, you know? Hope that answers your question about why folks in this village can't hear nothing. But you should know, none of us think badly of the girl for making us this way. Being deaf is a hell of a sight better than being dead. Anyway, we've all talked over that day to death, and we think that the final scream was her way of saying goodbye. Everyone in the village is honored that the last thing we ever heard was her farewell. And that's the God's honest truth. The girl had 2 huge horns. They were just a bit above her ears, and they looked like those of a cow. I saw the roots of her horn once, and it looked like something that grew out of her skull. Of course, only she was like that. Everyone else was normal. The kid with the horns was small when she was born. I meant her horns. Well, of course, if she had those huge horns, she's not gonna be able to come out of her mom's belly. You thought that she would be bullied, didn't you? Then you're completely wrong. The child was stronger than anyone in the village. There were no males that could win against that kid. She did all the work that required brute force, and whenever shades attacked the village, she'd always be the first to fight them. More than that, everyone loved her. She was bright and strong, but this shade that attacked one day was strong. The village men were tossed around like rags, and half of them were dead. She with the horns fought as hard as she could, but even she exhausted her power. At last the shade took her body and ripped her horns off. Her scream back then was really something, and was the sound that shook the ground. When everything settled, I went out of my house and saw that both she and the shade died. Both were bleeding from countless holes throughout their bodies. They, how should I put it, were beautiful, like bright red flowers, even though that's a pretty insensitive comment. That's the answer to your first question, why nobody in this village can hear anything. But I want you to know, none of us blame her. It's much better than being dead. We confirmed with each other in that last aftermath, but her last shout seemed to be goodbye. I'm proud that the last words we ever heard were her words of parting. Really.